Hello, welcome back to the Week 11 NFL DFS Slate Breakdown. We'll be going over the whole slate. We do have 11 games. Should be an interesting one. We got a lot of blowouts forecasted this week. So it'll be an interesting one to kind of dive into and go over it all. Now, before we do, come join us at LineStar. $39.99 per month gets you access to everything we do, all the props, all the DFS. You get it all. One low price. Come join the fun. Come get involved. Let's do it. All right, guys. Now, let's get into this slate a bit here. So, we have the 11-game slate. Only a couple games that we really need to fully go over. The Chargers versus Green Bay, 44-point total. Bears versus Lions, 48-point total, but Lions are pretty heavy favorites. And then Raiders versus Dolphins, 46-point total, but a 13.5-point spread. So just a giant spread there. Then Arizona versus Texans at 48. And we got to go over Tampa Bay at San Francisco. It's a 12.5-point spread. So Giants team or 49ers team total is super high. And then the same with the Cowboys versus the Panthers, game total 42 and a 10.5-point spread. And lastly, Seahawks versus Rams at a 46.5 game total. Now, the fastest games of the week, this is one where we've really been able to find some value just, from stating kind of week in and week out. But Arizona and Houston is the fastest game of the week. They're also the highest game total, or tied with the highest game total, and projects to be one of the closer games with a high game total. So I think there's going to be a lot of focus on this game for DFS reasons. The next fastest is the Chargers at Green Bay. We do obviously have to look at weather with it being in Green Bay, but this is one of the faster games of the week, and I think there's going to be some fantasy goodness to be found in there, and maybe going overlooked because the game total is a little bit lower there. And then lastly, Pitt Cleveland is a fast one, but with a 33-point game total, let's just gloss over that one and not talk about it and go to the Seahawks versus the Rams. This does project as one of the faster games of the week, and it's 1-point spread. This game is probably going to go a little overlooked because the team totals aren't there, but I think it's a very interesting one to target, and we know that if the Rams are able to get to a little bit of lead, we know Seahawks will go, throw heavy and play catch up and try and get there. And that is a situation where a game can really kind of get going and turn into one of those, Chargers versus Lions type games of last week where the total just gets very, very big. So I think that's a very interesting game that is kind of going overlooked. Now, let's get over let's stay off the ownership page. We'll stay on the projection page. All right, so highest owned quarterbacks here. We got Lawrence, Goff, and Purdy. Before I get to that, let's do the team totals. Dolphins, almost 30-point team total. Lions are right up there at 28. 49ers, then Houston and Dallas both at 26. These teams are going to have a lot of ownership. Just know that. Now, with so many blowouts forecasted, I think that it's probably smart for us to stack those, high team totals, but we don't necessarily have to do game stacks with them. Like, I don't think we have to force a Dolphin stack with a Lions player coming back. If it really is a blowout, just let it be a blowout. Let the Dolphins score 40 points and kind of move on. Now, let's get into the quarterback. So starting Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, and Purdy, 3 highest owned guys. Now, what we've seen with DFS all season long is the quarterback ownership gets way spread out. Generally not too much, over, 9, 12%, something like that. So I don't think we have to worry about ownership too much in the quarterback spot. What I will say is there are a couple lower owned guys that I think are very interesting. Justin Fields, I like a lot. It's in a game environment we like, and if the Bears can keep this game close, there is chance of a shootout here. It's also in a dome, which, just helps for overall fantasy goodness. Kyler Murray and CJ Stroud, I love this game, and I'm definitely going to be targeting it. Matthew Stafford, I think, is in a good spot. In week 1, he went for 334 yards versus Seattle. They put up 30 points. He can absolutely come out and have that yardage again. That week 1, they had like 3 rushing touchdowns. That isn't likely to happen again. It's more likely to be a couple passing touchdowns, which could be extremely good for fantasy. So I think he is interesting in his price tag. And then on the flip side, Geno Smith. My one issue with Geno Smith is he doesn't go for 30 points pretty much ever. But in a situation where his team is being pushed, he does have that possibility. He does have a little bit of rushing upside. He can get a rushing touchdown. So the ability to go 30 is there. We just don't see it often. So we really do need a ceiling game from him to pay off. But I think he is at least of interest. A lot of different ways you can go at quarterback today. I don't love Trevor Lawrence. Jared Goff, I think, is decent. But the Bears defense has been a lot better than it was earlier in the season. So that is something to consider as well. Purdy, this San Francisco team can put up points quickly. So they're obviously interesting, and typically it's hard to run against them. So Purdy is a little bit more interesting, even in a blowout. Now, get over to... Actually, we got to do DraftKings real quick here. All right, highest owned quarterbacks here, DraftKings, Kyler, Purdy, Stroud. Look, I think it pretty much should be with those kind of prices. Kyler, Stroud are two of my favorite ones this week. Tua is interesting. We did not talk about him on FanDuel, but they have one of the higher game totals of the week. The one thing I will say is that the Raiders have been a little bit better versus the pass than the run. So with how good the Dolphins have ran the ball all year long, the likely way to success for them is on the ground. They don't really have to throw. Now they're going to, and Tyreek is still probably going to get his and possibly could get in the end zone a couple times, and Tua could go absolutely nuts. And for that reason, he should be considered, but understand the most likely path is through the ground on that game. Howell, we gotta consider Howell every week at this point. He's had so many big games. He's in a decent matchup. You gotta go back to him, and they are a pass-heavy team. The other thing I want to add here is that Antonio Gibson is doubtful, so Brian Robinson could be a little bit better. I just want to state that in case I forget when we get to running back, which we are going now. So the high-owned running backs, we got CMC, James Conner, and Devin Singletary. Singletary clearly should be one of the highest-owned running backs. He's in an absolutely spectacular spot against Arizona. So I like him. He had a huge game last week. Can he follow that up? I mean, he had 32 touches. I don't think he's getting to 32 again, but mid-20s is totally possible. Dameon Pierce has mispracticed again all week, so it is expected to be Singletary's work. James Conner, he had a lot of work his first game out versus Atlanta. He's coming against Houston now. It's not, an amazing spot, but for the workload and with Kyler being back, I think his price is just way too cheap on DraftKings, so he's interesting. CMC is a weekly start. There's really nothing else you can say. You can always consider him. It's another week where, guys we can count on for close to 30s might be slim. especially the running back spot, and he can do it. Gibbs is getting up there ownership, but he's been crushing. Even last week, he got 17 touches with splitting the workload. So the touches are going to be there. The one thing is Chicago's been good against the ground, but they've been giving it up through the air to the running back. So that is why Gibbs is interesting this week. Aaron Jones is in a smash spot versus the Chargers in a faster game environment. Probably going a little overlooked, so you should consider him. Tony Pollard. Look, he's going to be chalky on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's not that chalky. His price is still kind of up there, but his price keeps coming down, and he has a crazy involvement in this offense in a very good rushing matchup. Issue? Does it happen like last week where it's a quick blowout and Rico Dowdle gets all the work? Very possibly. On DraftKings, where he's a little lower owned, I think you have to consider Pollard. I mean, on both sides, you have to. It's a great matchup, and if people are finally jumping off that bandwagon, it might be a good time to strike. Jacksonville versus Tennessee. Tennessee run D has been very solid. However, they've got a little weaker over the last couple games, and ETN is a legit running back with huge upside, so I think you got to consider him. And Austin Eckler, weekly consideration, especially in this spot where it's a game environment that we really like. Brian Robinson. Like I said, Antonio Gibson is doubtful. Robinson's going to get a ton of work this week. We have seen that he can be a decent pass catcher. 6 receptions for 119 yards last week. If he is getting all the work in a good matchup at 5,800, I am extremely interested at this ownership. And let's get over to FanDuel and their higher owned running backs. All right, so we got Jacobs, we got Singletary, and we got Breece Hall. I love that it's different because it makes it way easier to talk about guys here. So, Jacobs, look, I think his role is tremendous. The 2 weeks with Antonio Pierce's coach, 27 touches and 26 touches. Sorry, 29 and 26. I think they're going to give him the ball as much as he possibly can handle. If the Raiders are able to stay in this game, that's going to continue happening. However, if they're not and they don't stay in the game, he's going to get passing work. He's going to stay involved. I think his floor is super high, but in this matchup, his ceiling may be pushed down quite a bit. That's my issue with him. Breece Hall, he's actually in a good matchup versus Buffalo. Buffalo has been a lot weaker versus the running back lately. Just likely Breece Hall hasn't really got it going. Versus Vegas, versus the Chargers, didn't really do it. Had a good game through the air versus the Giants, but stuffed against the run. He's just been constantly kind of stuffed against the run recently. Now he is a big play threat, so he could do it, but low total, high price tag, I just don't love it. Kenneth Walker's in a game we really like. The matchup is decent, so I think he's absolutely in line for some work and some consideration. Tony Pollard, we have him at lower ownership. I think he's going to be a bit higher owned than he is here. The matchup is just insane. Doesn't really get better. He has a big workload, big time favorites. Normally, this running back in this situation would be insanely popular. A running back who has shown success in a great matchup with a huge total and big time favorites. Almost every time that running back is super, super expensive, it is, or super, super high owned. It's weird that he's just going so overlooked, but he's failed us week in and week out here. So I also understand his efficiency is just way down from last year. We're just not seeing those big plays created that he was able to do frequently last year. All right. Wide receiver, high owned guys. We got CD, we got McLaurin, we got Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown with Kyler has been really good for, a year and a half now. He didn't do much last week, but with Kyler, he routinely was doing well the year prior. Think we can go back there. It's a great matchup. Michael Wilson, you can also go to. CeeDee Lamb, dude has been unreal. Absolutely unreal for this last stretch. 151 yards, 191 yards, 158 yards, 117 yards. They've been trying to get him the ball a ton, and it's been good for the Cowboys. So even though it's a better matchup on the ground, why would they go away from CeeDee Lamb at this point? So I think you have to consider him. Price tag is up there, though. That is the one reason I would be getting away from him. The combination of that real high price tag and high ownership. And frankly, he can't keep getting 150 yards every week. Low owned guys to consider here. Obviously, the Chicago receivers and the Lions guys, I think we need to consider. If we go to our projections, Tyreek Hill, absolutely have to consider him. Look, he is extremely expensive, but he's in a good matchup. He can crush anybody, and he can break the slate any single week. So if he's low owned with the highest game total of the week, I think it's a great spot for him. Cooper Kupp, hey, Stafford's back, so you got to consider him, especially at 8,200. Amon-Ra, I think he's getting a little too pricey. Don't quite love it, but I understand it. Keenan Allen is questionable, but going to get a ton of work. All these guys are pretty interesting. If we bring up our leverage, let's see. Tank Adele's price is up there these days, but again, Houston versus Arizona is a game we're going to be targeting, so it is an interesting one. Gotta consider the 49ers weapons all around as well, and all of the Seattle and Rams weapons. Get over to DK. All right, so highest owned receivers, we got Calvin Ridley, Michael Wilson, Rondell Moore, Tyreek Hill. Ridley. This is the thing with Ridley, is he is too cheap for his potential 30-point ceiling in a good matchup. So you got to consider him. But he's 20, 30 yards or 120 or 80, So I think he is that boom bust guy that at high ownership worries me a little bit. At low ownership, I am slamming him. And that's kind of my feeling on him in this spot. If you really want to play against Tennessee, I might go Kirk in this situation just because of ownership. Wilson, we've talked about. He's running a lot of routes. He's being involved. Kyler's back. You got to consider him. DJ Moore is interesting. I honestly might just cross off that Browns versus Steelers game. The total is so low, and I just don't see a path for it to really be a shootout. Seattle, Rams in consideration. CeeDee Lamb on DK isn't going as high owned, so you got to consider him. Tampa Bay is going to have to throw against the 49ers. You can consider Godwin or Evans. There is a ton of different places to go, and likely more that will be shown while the injury report's coming out. Devontae Adams. Look, Raiders very easily could have to throw a ton in this game, and he got 13 targets last week. He got 7 the week before, and that was in a huge blowout, 30-6 versus the Raiders, where they were just pounding the ball, running, and he got 7 targets. So I think the targets are going to be there. It's just, is he able to break for a touchdown? Does he get, 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown? I think it's not unlikely, and his price is down where I'd be considering him. And let's take a look at tight end now. All right, so high-owned tight ends, Cole Kmet, McBride, and Ingram. All three are great. The one thing I will say with Kmet, before Fields got hurt, 3 touchdowns the last 2 games, 127 yards over those 2 games. Fields can throw the ball. He can throw them to Kmet. I think Kmet's in a decent spot. Trey McBride, I mean, his price has finally came up. But look, 9 targets, 8 for 131 last week. A couple weeks ago, 14 targets, 10 for 95 and a touchdown. I think it's absolutely possible in a decent matchup versus Houston. And Evan Ingram. Ingram's actually been used a lot out wide and more as like a wide receiver. So I think you got to consider him as well. He gets solid targets. Zay Jones is still going to be out. It is him, part of that 3-headed receiving monster. And if you are playing Lawrence, I think you really got to consider Ingram, but you could just do a one-off of him. Dalton Schultz. Noah Brown is questionable. Looks like Nico Collins is going to be back. Tank Dell is there. Schultz is interesting. However, if Noah Brown is back and they have kind of a healthy wide receiver core, I like Schultz less. I think it's a great spot for Laporta. And outside of that, I'm probably just kind of snacking my quarterbacks with my tight end. Outside of those guys, especially this week, where, you got Kittle or Laporta being the higher priced ones, there's really not that many places to go to. I don't love Kittle in a huge blowout of which all their, weapons are healthy, but he did it versus Jacksonville, did it versus Cincinnati, did it versus Dallas. He seems to be doing very well against solid defenses, and Tampa Bay's defense isn't terrible. All right, quick matchup tool. Actually, sorry, I forgot to do FanDuel tight ends. Ingram, McBride, and Kincaid. Got to talk about Kincaid. I'm so glad that he was one of the higher ones so he could here. Look, this guy's been used a ton. Now, it is a tough matchup versus the Jets, but he's, been high single digits targets or double digit targets every week since he's been the tight end 1. He's going to continue to do that. He is absolutely of interest in this spot at only 5,800 on FanDuel. Ferguson, dude has a real high ceiling. He has shown it. $6K is a little expensive for him on FanDuel. I like him a little bit more on DraftKings, but high game total. He is definitely one of Dak's preferred weapons. So you got to consider him as well. All right, now matchups. Purdy, Murray, Geno, Fields, all guys we were interested on the top of the matchup, as well as Howell and Stafford. Dak is there too. Look, you can consider Dak. Maybe they come out passing again like this. I just don't think they will. I don't think either they want to... obviously Cowboys want to kill the Giants, but seeing Panthers, I don't think they're going to want to kill them, and they're definitely not going to want to or feel like they have to come out just slinging the ball around. So I don't like Dak quite as much this week. Running back. Best matchups. Dolphins. We talked about this. A-Chain is going to be back, so there is Mostert and A-Chain. Both are interesting. Singletary, great matchup. Pollard, great matchup. We talked about all that. Barkley literally is the offense. If the Giants are able to stay in this game, it is 100% because of Saquon Barkley. Breece Hall has been better than, or a better matchup than most think. James Cook. One thing that is interesting to talk about as far as the Bills, it is a new offensive coordinator. The rotations could be a little bit different. It very easily could be James Cook. We're getting all of the workload this time, or it could be more of a 50-50 split. But it's something to think about and to consider. Connor's in a good matchup. All of these guys we've talked about. And then Khalil Herbert is back as the starter. Lions have been good versus the rush, so I don't love this spot, but he is back being starter. We got to talk about Robinson. I know we talked about him once before, but look, he's given it up to, or the Giants have given up to running back pretty much everybody not named Tony Pollard or James Cook. But we do know that Rico came in and crushed the Giants. So it's not a, it's a good matchup for Brian. If he's getting all the work, you got to like that. Scary Terry, great matchup. Pass heavy team. DJ Moore, good matchup. The one thing with this RB1 spot or WR1 spot versus the Lions is outside of Keenan and Thielen, they've been pretty good. But Moore did get to them last year, week 16. So that's the one thing to understand there is they have been good versus the wide receiver one, except for a couple times. And both players are more kind of route running, medium A-dot type receivers than, DJ Moore, who is generally a little bit higher of a A-dot, but can do a lot of things. He's a legit receiver. Watson, really good matchup. Hard to trust. Love. Ridley's a good one. Hopkins, Metcalf, Evans. A lot of the spots we know about. And the best tight end matchups, Musgrave. It's one we didn't talk about as far as a low-owned guy, and he's getting some targets. He's relatively cheap, at least on DraftKings. Tight end on FanDuel is kind of weird because they don't get the big discount. Kittle. He's one of the only high-owned tight ends, so you kind of got to consider him. And some tight ends have had real big days against Tampa, so you do have to consider it, even though I kind of brushed it off at first. McBride, Laporta, a lot of different ways to go, and that will do it for us today. You guys have a good one. I'll be back next week. Let's make some money. Good luck. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the video. See you.